The Pelta is a highly adaptable and long-serving frigate class which originally saw service with the Republic Judiciary Forces and various systems defense organizations in the years just prior to the outbreak of the Clone Wars. Since then, the type has remained in service with various groups, among them cells of the Alliance to Restore the Republic. The standard Pelta measures in at 282 meters long and is 50 meters wide and 40 meters tall. Although initially intended as a rugged and dependable transport and supply ship, the lightly armed and as a result with just a group of anti-fighter flak batteries. However, throughout its life, several variants have been built with varying levels of armament, ranging from unarmed freighters to respectably armed frigates. Some vessels even feature a small hangar bay to hold a group of starfighters. During the years before the Clone Wars, the Republic Judiciary Forces and the Republic Disaster Relief and Emergency Commission began cooperating to develop a class of transports to fulfill their joint requirements for new ships to haul cargo and supplies at long distances from their respective bases. Both the RJF and the RDRAEC had initially intended to purchase existing off-the-shelf designs, with vessels from several yards considered. However, before any orders were placed, the Chancellor's office suggested that both groups pool resources to develop a totally new class to suit their needs. Such an action would allow the groups to acquire a vessel tailored to their own specific requirements rather than a more generalized ship made for the wider galactic market by one of the larger manufacturing firms. The Judiciary Forces decided early on in this process that if they were getting a vessel custom designed for them, then it would be a wise decision to ensure that the ship could carry some armament, intending that any ships they operated would be able to undertake the policing and anti-piracy missions that were its staple in the period. Both groups intelligently worked together to hammer out exactly what they desired from their new ship before going out in search of a yard to build it. Once this was done, roughly 2 years before the First Battle of Geonosis would plunge the galaxy into its first total war in centuries. The design was finalized and began production. Entering service in initially small numbers just prior to the start of the Clone Wars, production of the Pelta class was rapidly scaled up to meet wartime demands for supply ships and transports, with the Grand Army of the Republic building many thousands of these ships in multiple variants to fill the fleet and replace combat losses. The most produced variants were the general-purpose transports, used to carry everything from random cargo and medical supplies to munitions and troops. In these roles, Pelta-class ships found themselves thrown into the thick of the fighting, with several ships notably being disabled by the separatist battlecruiser Malevolence during an attack on a Republic medical station in the early phases of the war. Serving throughout the war, the Pelta saw the transition from Republic to Empire without alteration to its service initially, continuing to serve in whatever role the ship was assigned. However, as the Empire began to restructure its fleet, the ship was, alongside many other Republic holdovers, replaced by newer models and withdrawn from service. Many Pelta-class ships were scrapped, with many more placed into reserve fleets throughout the galaxy. However, still more ships were sold at nearly scrap value to various sector defense forces and commercial carriers. Because of this easy availability on the civilian market, a few Pelta-class ships would find themselves in the hands of various rebel groups, both those aligned with the Rebel Alliance and those which fought against the Empire on their own terms, for their own goals. The majority of Pelta-class vessels which found themselves in Rebel hands were initially the unarmed transport and freighter versions, and many continued to perform such basic carrying functions even in their new clandestine hands. Many more ships, however, were heavily refit with improved guns, armor, sensors, shields, and engines to allow them to act as small warships in rebel formations. As the war increased in its intensity, most of these militarized Peltas were either destroyed or otherwise retired. However, the freighter and transport versions continued to serve right past the Battle of Endor, though the newly proclaimed New Republic quickly began a program to retire many of the oldest vessels from their fleet, including the Peltas. Even though its service with military forces had ended, the Pelta remained a common sight along the major trade lanes in civilian hands, lasting well into the reign of the New Republic and long past the collapse of the Empire. Beginning its life at a time when money was tight and the need overwhelming, the Pelta-class frigate would play a key role in the most destructive and far-reaching conflicts of its time. Surprisingly, once its military service had ended, the ship continued in service for several decades in civilian hands, a testament to the design that it served for so long a period and with so many different operators.